Shalom. First off, I'm going to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Baharachak Quadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of GMS who have taught us this word and teach us this word today. And I want to give a salutation unto the elect of the nation of Israel. This is the brother Yatazak Bob with the GMS Nebraska camp. And in this lesson, what I want to get into is going into this false doctrine that has been preached by the Genesis Israelites, Hassad and Hakah. And I'm a couple days late to this. They made this video, I want to say 4 or 5 days ago, but I finally listened to a bulk of the video and just wanted to make a response to defend the gospel, because that's what this is all about. It's not about arguing with these different camps, these different Israelites that don't believe the truth. It's not about trying to change their mind. It's about clearing up the confusion that they spread unto the nation. It's about making sure that the truth is put out there to clean up this mess that they make. Because doctrine is important. The scriptures say in 1 Timothy 4:16, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them. And that's not what they're doing. They're not continuing in the doctrine. There was a point where they taught that salvation was only for the Israelites, but because of, they say that they don't teach that anymore, and now they've looked into the scriptures and they believe this now to be true. And the reason they gave was completely carnal. It wasn't aligned with the Holy Spirit. They said that, they believe that even if they are wrong, that what they teach would be a less severe punishment than teaching that is just for the Israelites, but we're wrong. And they don't know, they're up in the air. They're like, there's room that we could be wrong, but just in case we are, we think that this would be a better thing to teach. And all these different, the truth is the truth. There is a sound doctrine that is supposed to be taught, and it's either you're teaching it or you're not, and reading on in this 1 Timothy 4:16, it says, take heed unto thyself and unto the doctrine, continue in them, for in doing this thou shalt both save thyself and them that hear thee. So teaching the true doctrine, believing in the true doctrine, has a big part to play in receiving salvation. You can't just be believing in a lie and not believing in the truth of the scriptures and think that you're going to be saved. No, you have to continue in the doctrine, and then that's where the salvation comes from. And they're asking, what do you think our judgment would be if this is wrong? Well, the scriptures say what the judgment would be. In Revelation 22 and 6, or no, Revelation, let me see, Salakia. Okay, Revelation 22:18. It says, for I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book. If any man shall add unto these things, the Most High shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy, the Most High shall take away his part out of the book of life and out of the holy city and from the things which are written in this book. So if you add to the prophecy, if you take away from the prophecies, if you're not teaching it right, then there's a severe judgment that comes with it. You were part of the 2/3, essentially. So just wanted to make this video to defend the gospel, put sound doctrine out there. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. Let's go ahead and get into it. The first precept I wanted to grab here is Romans 9:4, which says, who are Israelites, to whom pertaineth the adoption and the glory and the covenants and the giving of the law and the service of the Most High and the promises. This scripture right here is the should be the nail in the coffin, but you have a lot of people who will take different precepts, spin them, try to twist them to fit the doctrine they want it to be. But the scripture says right here that it's Israelites to whom pertain all these things, the adoption. When you read and it talks about Gentiles, strangers being joined to the house of Israel, and now, Gentiles are being taught to, and now they're being grafted in. These are Israelite Gentiles that's being adopted. When it talks about the glory, the kingdom, that's for the Israelites. The covenants, the first and second covenant was made with a specific nation of people. The giving of the law was given to who? The nation of Israel, the service of the Most High. We are a kingdom of priests. It says, and the promises. And what are one of those promises? The promise of salvation unto the elect of the nation of Israel. That in and of itself should show you that this doctrine is false. Because if you have 2/3 of the nation of Israel that won't even receive salvation, that won't be saved from the coming destruction of America, what makes you think that the Lord is going to choose heathen and save them? If the nation of Israel is the Lord's, a special people unto himself, as it says in Deuteronomy, let's get that, Deuteronomy 7:6. For thou art an holy people unto the Lord Yahweh thy power. The Lord Yahweh thy power had chosen thee to be a special people unto himself above all people that are upon the face of the earth. So if the nation of Israel is the Lord's number one people, and he's not even going to save all of the nation of Israel from this coming destruction, what makes you think that some of the heathen would be saved from this coming destruction? That doesn't make any sense. Now they believe, that within the heathen receiving salvation, that some of the heathen that believe on this truth, that believe on the Messiah, which isn't scriptural, because if you had heathen that believed in this truth, that believed in the Messiah, then they would be teaching. But you don't have no heathen out here teaching. If anybody comes into this truth and the truth resonates with them, the scriptures say, Romans 8:16, the Spirit bear witness with our spirit that we are the children of the Most High. This is a spiritual thing. For when you have people that look like these different nations and they can receive this truth and it resonates with them, and they confess that this is the word, and they go out there teaching, those are Israelites. The scriptures say that we are a speckled bird. We've been scattered across the four corners of the earth, mingled amongst these different nations. But it's an Israelite if they can receive this truth on that level. But let's go to their teaching. They say that if a heathen believes in this truth, they believe in the Messiah, then they can escape hardcore bondage in the kingdom. But that's not what the scriptures say. In Deuteronomy 30:7, it says, and the Lord Yahweh thy power will put all these curses upon thine enemies and on them that hate thee, which persecuted thee. Now, who are the enemies of the nation of Israel in the scriptures? Well, let's go to Psalms 83. And that scripture is important when it says these curses shall be turned upon the enemies, because what are the curses? What are one of the main curses that we're going through right now? We're under captivity. But leading up to this captivity we're in today, we went through a hardcore bondage. And all these different nations that are about us, all these heathen have had a hand to play in the nation of Israel going into captivity all throughout history, and those curses are going to be turned onto them. They're going to have to go through that as well. The whole of the nation of Israel had to go into captivity, had to suffer, had to be at the bottom, had to go through evils. So these nations are going to have to go through them same things. You're not going to have it to where some of the heathen amongst these different nations is going to be cool. They just going to be in our courts, vassals unto us, and then the rest of the heathen, they're going to be the ones going through the hardcore bondage. No, the same way that all of the nation of Israel had to suffer and had to be chastised by the Most High is the same way that all of the nations of these heathens are going to have to go through hardcore bondage. In Psalms 83:2, it says, Psalms 83:2, it says, for lo, thine enemies make a tumult, and they that hate thee have lifted up the head. So who are these enemies in this chapter? Let's jump down to verse 5, where it says, for they have consulted together with one consent, they are confederate against thee. The tabernacles of Edom, which is the so-called white man, it says, and the Ishmaelites, these Arabs of Moab, the Chinese, and the Hagarenes, which is speaking about the Arabians. It says Gabal, speaking about Edom, one of the tribes of Edom. It says, and Ammon, the Japanese, and Amalek, one of the tribes of Edom, them small hats that's in our land today. The Philistines with the inhabitants of Tyre, speaking about these African tribes, these Hamites. Ashur also is joined with them, which is speaking about these Arab tribes as well, if I'm not mistaken. I want to make sure, though. Strong's H 804, Ashawar, which it says the people of Assyria, the nation Assyria. Khan. So, all these different heathen, these Elamites, these East Indians, all these nations are going to go into captivity under the nation of Israel. And they tried to get around this chapter here where it speaks about who our enemies are. They tried to say that not every single one of the heathen are our enemies, and tried to bring out different examples in the scriptures. For example, they brought out the situation where you had, let me try to look. So one of the examples they brought out here was Jeremiah 38:7, where it says, now when Abed-Melech, the Ethiopian, so let's focus on that he was an Ethiopian, he is a heathen. And it says, one of the eunuchs which was in the king's house heard that they had put Jeremiah in the dungeon. The king then sitting in the gate of Benjamin, Abed-Melech went forth out of the king's house and spake to the king, saying, my lord the king, these men have done evil in all that they have done to Jeremiah the prophet, whom they have cast into the dungeon, and he is like to die for hunger in the place where he is, for there is no more bread in the city. So they bring out this example and say, because he looked out for Jeremiah, and because Jeremiah was saved out of the dungeon because of his mourning, he's not a enemy. Would he go into captivity as well? Well, hey, the scriptures say in Proverbs 16:7, it says, when a man's ways please the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. That doesn't change what the scriptures say. Just because you've had situations where heathen were peaceable with our nation, doesn't mean that, okay, well, for those, the Lord's going to pick and handpick some of the heathen where, all right, y'all good. They point at Ruth and do that for an example. The situation with Ruth, the example with Rahab the harlot, this just goes to show that in the kingdom, eventually there's going to come to a point where these nations are going to come and learn of our ways, and there's going to be peace upon the earth, but they're going to be subject unto us, though. And we read about this in Isaiah chapter 2, and we'll get that eventually. But I want to touch on this point where they're trying to, let the heathen duck the plagues that the scriptures prophesied that they're going to receive, and you can't do that. Let's go to Revelation 20, and we're going to go to verse 4. It says, and I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Yahushua and for the word of the Most High, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands. And they lived and reigned with Yahushua 1,000 years. So this is speaking about Israelites, those that thrones were given unto. The Israelites that died for the testimony of Yahushua, and are being resurrected. It's speaking about that first 1,000 years that they will reign with the Lord, the elect. Now, let's read on. And it says, but the rest of the dead lived not again until the 1,000 years were finished. This is the first resurrection. Now, who is this dead speaking about here that didn't live for the first 1,000 years? This dead is speaking about the heathen. And this is the totality of the heathen. How do we know this dead is speaking about the heathen? Well, let's grab a precept, Baruch 3:10, which says, how happened in Israel that thou art in thine enemy's land, that thou art waxen old in a strange country, speaking about heathen, that thou art defiled with the dead. That's what that dead is speaking about, these heathen. It says, Salaki, yeah, that was the point. So it's saying to Israel, how is it that y'all in these enemies' land, that you in the strange country, that you with the dead? So when we go back to Revelation, it says the rest of the dead live not again until the 1,000 years were finished. For the first 1,000 years in our kingdom, these heathen are going to be going through a hardcore captivity. We ain't going to be beamed up into chariots, and then we got heathen in the chariot next to us, and they watching us, receive our crowns and, in our new bodies, and they just going to come into the kingdom of Israel alongside us. That's not how that's going to go. We're going to put them in chains. The scriptures say in Psalms 148:14, it says, oh no, this isn't it. But I'll grab this. It's through the Spirit that came out. It says, he also exalted the horn of his people, the praise of all his saints, even of the children of Israel, a people near unto him. Praise ye the Lord Yahweh. This is only about the Israelites. That's who the Lord is coming to exalt. You know, that's who is being brought near. That's what this salvation is about. You know, but in the next chapter, that's what I meant to grab. It says in Psalms 149:5, it says, let the saints be joyful in glory, which is the Israelites. Let them sing aloud upon their beds. Let the high praises of the Most High be in their mouth, and a two-edged sword in their hand, to execute vengeance upon the heathen and punishments upon the people, to bind their kings with chains and their nobles with fetters of iron. We can't circumvent this and say it's not all the heathen. It is. You know, you can't point to different examples in the scriptures where, through your opinion, through your how you deduce the precept to go, you're like, well, you can't call him an enemy because he was being nice. Okay, just because somebody did an honorable act, okay, that's an honorable act, but that doesn't change prophecy. That doesn't mean that you can change the will of the Lord because of your opinion about somebody. The Lord is coming to judge the whole of these nations, not just picking and choosing through them. Another prophecy that shows that these heathen ain't going to receive salvation with the nation of Israel is this is the parable of the wheat and tares. Let's go to that real fast. Matthew chapter 13, verse 24, which says, another parable put he forth unto them, saying, the kingdom of heaven is likened unto a man which sowed good seed in his field. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed tares among the wheat and went his way. Now we understand these wheat and tares that it's speaking about. You know, what are wheat and tares? You know, they're crops that look basically identical. You know, from the naked eye, if you just look at them right next to each other, you would think they're the same crop. But you know, there's differences between them. They're not the same. And these wheat and tares is being used for, as an example today, how you have Israelites amongst these different nations that look like these nations, but they're Israelites by blood. The same way where you have heathen that may look like Israelites, but by their blood, they go to a heathen nation. You know, that's what this prophecy of the wheat and tares is speaking about. But when we read, it says, but when the blade was sprung up and brought forth fruit, then appeared the tares also. So the servants of the householder came and said unto him, Sir, didst not thou sow good seed in thy field? From whence then had the tares? He said unto them, an enemy had done this. The servant said unto him, wilt thou then that we go and gather them up? But he said, Nay, lest while ye gather up the tares, ye root up also the wheat with them. So in this parable, it's saying, no, don't gather them up together. But when they're gathered up, it says, in this parable, the Lord is saying that, you want the tares separated. So why would some heathen receive salvation from the coming destruction along with the Israelites? Let's read on. It says, let both grow together until the harvest. And in the time of the harvest, I will say to the reapers, gather ye together first the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn. So the angels are going to make a separation. There's going to be, the Lord ain't going to make no mistake with who receives salvation when the time comes. When we're beamed up into them chariots, anybody that's beamed up is going to be of the elect of the nation of Israel. No 2/3, no heathen is going to make it on them chariots. It's going to make it through this coming destruction. That's going to, destroy, America. And for these heathen that's worldwide, they're going to be gathered up and put in chains, like it says in Psalms chapter 149. And what are they going to do? Let's go to Isaiah 14:1. Shalakia. Which says, for the Lord Yahweh will have mercy on Jacob and will yet choose Israel and set them in their own land. And the strangers shall be joined with them. Now, them strangers is speaking about those Israelite foreigners, those Israelite Gentiles, just like I spoke about earlier, where, you had the Israelite Gentiles that was spoken unto, which was just Israelites that took on the customs of these different nations, that took on the ways of these people around them, and they're going to be put back into their right mind. That's happening right now. Just like we were in the mindset that we were black, Mexican, Native American, all these different things. Well, we are being, we're coming back to our heritage. And that's what the scripture is prophesying. It says, and the stranger shall be joined with them, and they shall cleave to the house of Jacob. And the people, now this is switching gears here in verse 2, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place. So the people is speaking about the Israelites, and it says, shall take them and bring them to their place. When it's talking about the them and the there, that's speaking about the natural Gentiles, the actual heathen. It says, and the people shall take them and bring them to their place, and the house of Israel shall possess them in the land of the Lord for servants and handmaids, and they shall take them captives, whose captives they were, and they shall rule over their oppressors. We were underneath these different nations through, course of history, and now today we are at the bottom. We are the lowest nation upon the face of this earth. You have these elites of Esau, and you have these elites of the Chinese and these different nations, the Ishmaelites, and all these different nations. You have elites of them as well. Esau is just on top. You don't have elites of Israelites in the world today. Even for Israelites that you have that are celebrities and that have, millions of dollars and things like that, that's crumbs compared to what these bankers got, compared to what these people that really hold power have. We're being oppressed in this time. We working for somebody else. We can't just live life, in peace and just kick back and do what we want to do, because we got to pay bills. We got to, feed ourselves. We got to, do all these different things. So what do we have to do in order to do these things? We have to work for our enemies. We oppressed in this world. We at the bottom, and all these people who have had a hand in doing that to us, we're going to do it to them. When it talks about the parable of Lazarus and the rich man, and the dogs came and licked Lazarus' wounds, that's speaking about the heathen, because they had a part in eating off of us being poor in this world. How these heathen have set up in the hoods and got their businesses set up and take advantage of Jake, giving them giving Jake all these destructive foods, selling Jake these cigarettes and all this alcohol and all this fried chicken, and selling Eve these weaves, the nail, the eyelashes, all these different things that's adding unto black culture. You see that these heathen be the ones that own these shops and take advantage of the state that Jake is in, and enable it. They profit off of it. These heathen, you have these different leaders of these countries that know the truth of who the nation of Israel is, and they didn't help with putting out that knowledge. Now you have Putin. What did he do? He showed the Russian icons. According to Hassad and Hakkad, because Putin did that, going off of what they saying, that would make him not an enemy no more, right? That would mean that he don't go into he don't go into hardcore bondage. He can be saved because he showed the Russian icons. He showed some truth. No, man, that was the will of the Lord. That was the Lord that allowed that truth to come out through him. He used the heathen to do it. Whoop-de-doo. Now, the scriptures do prophesy in Isaiah chapter 2 that there would come a point where these nations would, they're going to be taught of our ways. They're going to willingly submit to our way. They're going to call upon the names of Yahweh and Yahweh Shai. They're going to keep our law. And after those 1,000 years are finished, that's when the dead will live again, like it said in Revelation chapter 20. There's going to come a point to where it's going to be a strict, hardcore rule over them. But eventually we're going to let them have some more freedom in the lands that they that belongs to them. We're going to let them do their thing. And they're going to live righteously. But they're still they won't be on our level. They still going to be underneath us, give us the best of what they have. But let's read that prophecy in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2. It says, and it shall come to pass in the last days that the mountain of the Lord's house shall be established in the top of the mountains, and shall be exalted above the hills, and all nations shall flow unto it. And those mountains, those hills, that's speaking about a government, a rulership. It says the nations shall flow unto it. And many people shall go and say, come ye, and let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the power of Jacob. And he will teach us of his ways, and we will walk in his paths. So it's going to be a willing mind that these heathen eventually are in, because they will resist at first when they're put into captivity. They're not going to like it at first. They ain't going to like being in the same position that we was once in. But once we whip them into shape, once we get them in the right way that they need to walk in, At the end of those 1,000 years, the nation of Edom is going to be completely rooted out of the earth, and these heathen will be able to live with a little bit more autonomy and freedom. It won't be hardcore like that on them no more. It says, for out of Zion shall go forth the law and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And he shall judge among the nations and shall rebuke many people. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Because the scriptures do say when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked bear rule, the people mourn. The heathen are going to be happy to be ruled by us eventually, because they're going to see that the earth is in peace. They're going to see, that when we rule, there's a new heaven and a new earth. That there's goodness and righteousness in the earth. But Hakkad and Hassad are trying to skip right to that part. They're trying to skip right to the part to where, the heathen, right to the end of those 1,000 years. No, they have to go through the curses. They have to go through punishments. There's things that these heathen have to go through that they can't duck according to prophecy. And it's not just particulars amongst them, So, Lord willing, this lesson is edifying. Once again, I want to give all praise, honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahar Chakwadash. I want to give double honors to the apostles, elders, and bishops of GMS and